A key NATO ally has just pushed back, publicly and forcefully, against a flagship initiative from Washington. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk has rejected President Donald Trump's invitation to join the proposed Board of Peace, declaring that Warsaw is a loyal ally, not a vassal. The remarks land at a sensitive moment for transatlantic unity, and they signal growing unease inside Europe over the direction of the project. A diplomatic rift is widening between Washington and one of its most important NATO partners. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has rejected President Donald Trump's invitation for Warsaw to join the proposed Board of Peace, at least under current circumstances. His message was blunt: Poland is a loyal ally, but not a subordinate state.
I have been since the very first days of my political activity, almost half a century ago, an absolutely declared supporter of the closest possible transatlantic ties between the entire West, between Europe and the United States, and especially between Poland and the United States. This is beyond discussion. Anyone who exposes these relations to risks, to jeopardy, undermines the foundations of Polish security. Poland within this alliance is not now, nor will it ever be, and I assure you, for as long as I hold the position of Prime Minister of the Polish government, it will absolutely not be a vassal state. A loyal, faithful and truly dependable ally, yes, but it will never ever be a vassal in its relationships with any nation anywhere in the world, and I conveyed this message to the President himself in terms that were both unequivocal and perfectly clear. I get the impression that the President here holds a somewhat different opinion on this particular matter. I informed the President that our position is simply a cautious one. Today, the Peace Council appears to be an undertaking that is indeed very innovative, quite original, and not all aspects of this particular initiative fully align with Poland's interests, and it is necessary to be able to discuss this openly, even with our greatest ally. These alliance relationships cannot be based on someone constantly agreeing and trying to obtain something through flattery, because that simply doesn't work. I already know that very, very well. I've observed some politicians who overdid it with such subservience. They achieved no results. So we as a government clearly stated our position to the President. In these circumstances, perhaps the circumstances will change. As you know, many countries that are very important from our point of view, many countries have similar or different, but also doubts or question marks.
The Board of Peace was initially presented by Trump as a mechanism to support peace efforts in Gaza. But the initiative has since expanded into what some officials describe as a broader international platform, one that, according to reports, could evolve into an alternative forum to existing global institutions. Trump has invited multiple countries to participate, including Russia and Belarus. That outreach has triggered unease across several European capitals. Critics fear the initiative's long-term political direction and question how it would operate alongside or potentially compete with established global bodies. In January, most European Union member states declined to sign the alliance's founding charter. The hesitation reflected wider uncertainty about the project's structure, purpose, and geopolitical implications. Tusk's rejection also carried a domestic political edge. He criticized opponents at home for what he described as constantly nodding along, positioning his decision as a defense of Polish sovereignty within the Western alliance framework. The development represents another challenge for Trump's diplomatic push. While the Board of Peace is framed as a stabilizing initiative, divisions among allies suggest consensus remains elusive.
Russia will not be represented at the upcoming meeting of the Peace Council. However, the work to formulate our position is still ongoing. It's quite evident that Western powers have not abandoned their aspirations to sever and to do so by any means possible our fraternal republic from Russia. They are clearly preparing for revenge. Apparently, they're just waiting for the most opportune moment.
On February 6th, an attempted murder occurred in a Moscow apartment building. You are aware of this. The mass media, our law enforcement agencies have spoken about this. The assassination attempt on Lieutenant General Vladimir Stepanovich Alexeyev, the first deputy chief of the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, who was leading our country's delegation at the trilateral peace talks in Abu Dhabi. It is noteworthy that the day before Zelensky, in his televised address, announced, and this is a direct quote, the coordination with the recently appointed head of the SBU, Yevhen Kmara, who has already gained extensive experience in carrying out terrorist attacks in Russia, of new similar, as they stated, operations on Russian territory. This terrorist attack has once again confirmed the Zelensky regime's persistent strategy of constant provocations, with the explicit goal of undermining the negotiation process, a process that they themselves ostensibly presented as being directed towards a peaceful resolution. The intention of the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy to prepare a set of conditions, as she said, for Moscow, without which the EU will not support peace in Ukraine. Just think about it. Normal people should actually support peace. Well, I suppose in any case, as the fundamental objective, the primary task, as that specific point towards which one should constantly strive, as a crucial benchmark, a guiding light that one ought to observe and use to meticulously plan and construct their every step, and by which to navigate. But no, pause. The aspiration for peace here, from the perspective of the European Union, must be conditioned by specific requirements. Pause. That is to say, I reiterate, even the very desire for peace itself must be structured and formed upon the basis of these demands. And all this, of course, once again confirms the Euro bureaucracy's determination to prevent the conflict from ending by any means. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and our embassy in Havana are in constant close contact with Cuban authorities, air carriers, and tour operators to provide necessary assistance to Russian citizens in Cuba, especially tourists. We assume that the actions of external forces aiming to exacerbate the energy crisis in Cuba, including the suspension of flights to the island, are also calculated to provoke discontent among the population and foreign citizens inconvenienced by this situation. And in this situation, we urge all those who have encountered an involuntary delay in returning to their homeland to show calm and composure. At the same time, we ask those planning a trip to this country to consider the current circumstances, including the recommendations of the Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation. In recent months, the French president has repeatedly expressed to the media his apparent desire to resume Russian-French dialogue at the highest level and to hold a phone conversation with the president of Russia. However, as is often the case with our French colleagues, things haven't gone beyond words yet. We have never, I stress once more, refused high-level contacts with Paris. Indeed, it must be admitted that few other European states are doing so much today to undermine Russian-American negotiation efforts as France. Therefore, we prefer to judge former partners not by words and promises, but by actions. We've said this repeatedly. Therefore, we harbor no illusions about Paris's true intentions regarding dialogue with Moscow. At present, we have every reason to suppose that what lies behind this is not so much a genuine willingness to negotiate with our nation, while considering its fundamental interests, as an aspiration to intrude into the negotiation process and to try to impose upon us what is being advanced by the European Union and this so-called coalition of the willing. Why do I say allegedly? Because it seemed they wanted peace, but in reality we see they want anything but peace. The settlement options promoted by the EU's coalition of willing parties. We are convinced that sport must remain truly neutral, in the best sense of the word, and the international sports competitions must be open to all athletes without exception. Overcoming all challenges and limitations, 13 Russians have been granted admission to compete in 6 different sports. They are participating in these games under a so-called neutral status, and yet despite all of this, for us, these athletes are representatives of Russia, and we will, without a doubt, closely follow their performances and offer them our full support. Our country continues its work to restore the rights of domestic athletes and return Russian sports to the international arena. Already around 70 international federations are allowing adult athletes from Russia to compete in international events. Juniors have once again been granted the opportunity to compete in events under the national flag and with their anthem. We are counting on the swift restoration of the full status of the Russian Olympic Committee.
For our part, we thought we will do everything possible to facilitate this. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I can confirm this, has stated this previously. I want to emphasize once again that it continues to do everything within its power to assist the Russian archaeologist, who was detained in Poland on absurd charges brought against him by Ukraine. We are employing all diplomatic tools at our disposal. The representatives of the Russian embassy in Warsaw are extending him all the necessary support within their official capacity, maintaining continuous communication with his legal counsel, and facilitating the transfer of details to his family members. The Polish side received documents prepared by the State Hermitage which confirmed that Alexander Butyagin carried out archaeological excavations in Crimea from 1999 to 2025 in strict accordance with all existing regulations.
Media reports suggest the first Peace Council meeting will take place on February 19th, and notably, the Russian president's spokesperson has confirmed that Kremlin representatives won't be at the event. And the topic of peace itself is currently being worked on. Are any clear outlines of Russia's position regarding the Peace Council already emerging? And is anyone from our foreign ministry planning to participate in this particular meeting?
Russia will not be represented at the upcoming meeting of the Peace Council. However, the work to formulate our position is still ongoing. It's quite evident that Western powers have not abandoned their aspirations to sever, and to do so by any means possible, our fraternal republic from Russia. They are clearly preparing for revenge. Apparently, they're just waiting for the most opportune moment.
A hypothetical coup d'etat in Belarus and the coming to power there of Western
agents undoubtedly would nullify all achievements of the integration development of our union state with Belarus and would create another hotbed of instability. On our western borders, and as was correctly noted in the informational material you mentioned, Belarusian society has already been inoculated against attempts to destabilize the internal political situation. Republican authorities also took decisive measures to purge the country of pro-Western, so-called democratizing structures, and tightened legislation concerning non-governmental organizations to prevent their subversive work from within. Nevertheless, now we and our Belarusian allies do not intend to simply sit back, do nothing, and just observe all of this. Now, I really like this phrasing about partial accession. It seems to me that the European Union has already partially gotten itself mired in Ukraine. All that's left is for Ukraine to partially join there, as they said, to finally finish off the European Union completely. Well, you know, all these manipulations, the verbal acrobatics, the endless inventing of various new formulas, even in direct defiance of their own established laws and rules, it is precisely these things that have brought the entire situation on the European continent to such a truly deplorable and disheartening state. There's no talk of any economic, so to speak, development of this issue, and that's precisely how the European Union originated, nor of any humanitarian dimension, nor of any coordination in the sphere of peace building. Of course, that's out of the question. What we are discussing here is the endlessly manipulative approach to this issue by the Western handlers and the Kyiv regime, which they are using as a mere instrument.